When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was the familiar aroma of the dinner my mom was preparing. But upon seeing the soft light in the living room and my dad Marcus's worried expression, something inside me broke. Tears began to stream down my face, and I couldn't contain the pain that had built up in my chest. My dad was sitting on the couch, and his concerned look made my heart race. "Aisha, what happened?" he asked, quickly standing up and coming toward me. His voice was filled with a mix of affection and a palpable unease. I wanted to be strong, but the feeling of helplessness and the fear I had experienced earlier overwhelmed me. "It was Jonathan again, Dad," I managed to murmur, my voice trembling. He approached me on the bus and started making comments. He said things that made me feel sick. The memory of what happened made my stomach churn, and the tears kept flowing. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were trying to process it all. "Aisha, this is not right. You shouldn't have to go through this. No one should." He spoke with a contained anger, but the look on his face showed that he felt powerless. "Do you feel safe going to school? Taking the bus?" "I don't know, Dad. I just want this to stop. It's like I can't escape," I said, trying to wipe my tears with the sleeves of my sweater. "Why doesn't anyone do anything? Why is he still there?" "That's a good question," he replied, his voice trembling with emotion. "This can't go on, Aisha. You can't stay silent about this." I could see the determination growing in his eyes, and a part of me wished he could fix everything for me, make this pain disappear. As we spoke, a memory hit me. I remembered a conversation I overheard between my dad and Sarah, Mia's mom, at a school event a few weeks ago. She mentioned that Mia had gone through something similar, and her words echoed in my mind. "Don't stay silent. Talk to someone." It was as if every word had embedded itself in my heart. But now, looking at my dad, I realized he needed support too. He wasn't alone in this fight. "Dad, what if you talk to other parents? Maybe they have stories to share too," I suggested, feeling a spark of hope. "If we all speak up, maybe they'll listen." "You're right, Aisha," he replied, his voice now filled with determination. "We can't just stand by. We need to do something. If other kids are going through what you experienced, we have to act." His gaze was fixed on me, and I could see the passion building within him. "I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through," I said, feeling a new strength in my voice. "If we unite, maybe we can make a real change." Marcus nodded, and for the first time since I had entered the house, I felt a slight relief. It was as if the idea of fighting together, of not being alone, gave me a new hope. "Then let's do it, Aisha. Let's talk to the other parents. Let's make sure our kids are safe." In that moment, I realized that even amid the pain, there was a glimmer of hope. Together, we could make a difference. The tension in my mind was almost unbearable. As Aisha climbed the stairs, I knew I had to do something. She was so shaken, and my heart broke at the sight of her. As I looked out the window, the afternoon fog enveloped the city, but inside me, the heat of indignation began to intensify. I needed action, a movement. I picked up the phone, and with trembling fingers, dialing Sarah's number felt like the first step. The phone ringing felt like an endless echo, and the anticipation made me restless. When I finally heard her voice on the other end, something inside me calmed. "Hi, Marcus, how are you?" Sarah sounded warm, but I couldn't respond right away. The memory of what Aisha had gone through still echoed in my mind like a drum. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something serious," I began, trying to find the words. "Aisha," she was harassed again, this time by the bus driver. "It's unacceptable." The pause that followed was heavy. I could almost hear her breathing change, concern taking over. "Oh my God, Marcus. This is horrible. I've heard about other cases. We can't stay silent." Her words ignited a fire within me. "We need to meet with other parents. We need to act. We can't let this happen to more kids." "I completely agree. Let's organize a meeting, but we need a safe place where we can talk openly," Sarah suggested, already starting to devise a plan. "Yes, let's do it in front of the school. That way, we can draw attention to the situation." I'll call the other parents right now, I replied, feeling a determination grow within me. I hung up the phone and felt a wave of adrenaline rush through my body. What could have been a simple conversation was now turning into something bigger, a fight for the safety of our children. I grabbed my contact list and began dialing again, reaching out to parents I had met over the years. With each call, I shared Aisha's story and what had happened. Some parents were supportive, others were incredulous, but all agreed that it was time to act. The idea of a movement was taking shape, and the urgency of the situation spread like wildfire. "Hi, it's Lisa. What's going on, Marcus?" Her voice was filled with concern. "Lisa, you need to know that some kids are being harassed by the bus driver. Aisha went through a horrible situation today, and I'm organizing a meeting in front of the school to discuss this with other parents. Can you come?" "Absolutely, I'll bring Mark. This is unacceptable. We'll be there," she replied, her voice firm. Finally, with the meeting scheduled, I took a deep breath and prepared myself. I knew this would be a difficult battle, but the thought that Aisha and other kids could be in danger drove me forward. It was time to step up and ensure that no other child had to face what my daughter had endured. On the morning of the meeting, the atmosphere was charged with tension and indignation. The sun was high, but clouds of worry hung over us. As the parents began to arrive, I noticed a collective determination on their faces. "We're going to do this together," I whispered to myself, watching the group gather. Each had a story, a pain, and in that moment, the strength of unity became evident. I knew we were about to awaken something greater than ourselves. The fight for the safety of our children was just beginning. On the day of the meeting, the air was thick with tension, and a sense of outrage hung over the parents gathered in front of the school. I was there, observing every face, every expression. Anger and concern were palpable. Some parents chatted in small groups, while others paced back and forth, as if trying to dissipate their anxiety through movement. "Did you hear what happened to Mia?" one mother asked another, her eyes shining with worry. "I can't believe this is still happening. We need to do something." I moved closer, listening intently. I heard accounts of other children who had also been harassed, and the realization that I wasn't alone began to envelop me. It was a mix of sadness and determination. I glanced at my father, Marcus, who was talking to Sarah, Mia's mother. He seemed engaged, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. "We need to ensure our children are safe," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We can't let this continue. Aisha and the other kids deserve protection." Those words resonated within me. I wanted to do something too. The idea of being just a bystander to everything that was happening didn't sit well with me. As the parents shared their stories, I felt a growing urge to express myself. That's when I decided I had to take action. With the help of a few friends, I found a quiet corner to write a letter to the school principal. My heart raced, but the words flowed like a river. "Dear Principal, I am writing to express my deep concern about the safety of the students, especially after what happened to me and other students," I wrote, carefully choosing each word. When I finished, I handed the letter to my dad. He read it aloud, and the emotion in his voice was evident. "Aisha, this is powerful," he said, tears in his eyes. "You have an incredible strength. I'm so proud of you." "I just want things to change, Dad," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "We can't allow this to keep happening." He hugged me, and in that moment I realized I wasn't alone. We had a fight ahead of us, but we were in it together. Marcus turned to the other parents and said, "We all have stories to tell. We need to come together and be the voice for our children." Hearing that gave me a warmth inside. The determination that was beginning to blossom within me transformed into courage. Soon the meeting took on a new shape. The energy in the air seemed to change as parents began to mobilize. They held makeshift signs, and the voices of protest began to echo. "Safety now!" and "Enough with the harassment" resonated among the groups. I felt like part of something bigger, a wave of change. Listening to the stories of other children, I realized that unity was key. The strength of all those parents sharing their experiences and pain was creating a safe space for all of us to speak. The desire for change was palpable, and in that moment, I decided I would also be part of that change. "Let's make this happen together," one mother said, and her words echoed within me. Aisha, the harassed girl, was transforming into Aisha, the safety advocate, and I knew that with every word spoken, we were one step closer to a safer future for all of us. The atmosphere was charged with tension and indignation as we gathered in front of the school. Looking around, I saw the faces of parents who, like me, were tired of staying silent about what was happening to our children. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light that contrasted with the seriousness of the moment. I held a sign that read, "Safety for our children," and I felt my heart race. "I've been thinking about what happened to Aisha," a mother next to me said, her voice trembling. "It's not fair that our kids have to go through this. We need to act." "I agree," I replied, trying to stay calm. "We need to show that we won't accept this kind of behavior. Not just for Aisha, but for all kids." As more parents joined us, the energy of the group grew. Everyone shared their stories, and each account was more heartbreaking than the last. The atmosphere was one of outrage, but also of unity. When I looked at Aisha's face, which was a bit distant, I saw a determination that filled me with hope. She was there, even in silence, and that motivated me to keep going. "Let's do this the right way," a father said, raising his voice. "We need to be heard. Let's demand a meeting with the school administration." The crowd agreed, and in a moment of fervor, we began to chant, "Safety now, no to harassment." The sound of our voices echoed, resonating through the school, and I felt like we were making history. As the protest unfolded, I saw the police arriving, and my anxiety spiked. "What will they do?" I asked Sarah, who was beside me. "Do you think they'll disperse us?" "No, they can't. We're just asking for safety," she replied firmly. The officers approached us, and I could see they were observing the situation closely. One of the officers came over and asked to speak with someone from the group. I took a deep breath and decided to step forward. "Hi, I'm Marcus, Aisha's dad. We're here because our kids aren't safe on the school bus. We need the school to take immediate action." The officer nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. "We are aware of the situation. We will listen to you, but we need everything to remain peaceful." "Of course," I replied, trying to stay calm. "But we need actions, not just promises. Aisha has gone through this multiple times, and we can't wait any longer." "I understand your concern," the officer said. "I will report this to my superiors and see what we can do." At that moment, Aisha approached me, holding a piece of paper. "Dad, I wrote a letter to the principal," she said, her voice trembling. "I want him to know how I feel." I looked at her, amazed. "You're incredible, Aisha. Your voice is important. Let's read this at the meeting." The crowd began to organize, and the energy was palpable. I knew we were doing something significant, and something inside me ignited. When the stage was improvised and Aisha prepared to read her letter, I realized we were all in this fight together. The police, while present, didn't seem inclined to disperse us. They were listening, and that was a victory in itself. I felt a wave of hope and determination. After all, we were there for our children, and we wouldn't stop until we had answers and concrete actions. After the protest, adrenaline still coursed through my veins. I had witnessed the power of parents and communities coming together, and it inspired me in a way I never thought possible. As I walked home, a persistent thought echoed in my mind. I couldn't just stand by. I needed to do more. That's when the idea struck me. What if I created a blog, I thought. A space where my friends and I could share our experiences, discuss consent, and provide resources for other kids who, like me, were going through tough times. As soon as I got home, I went straight to my computer. With my hands trembling with excitement, I opened Word and started to write. "Hi, my name is Aisha, and this is our safe space. Here, we're going to talk about what it means to have control over your own body, about consent, and, most importantly, about how to protect ourselves." The words flowed, and I felt the urgency to deliver my message. "Hey, Aisha, what are you doing?" my mom asked as she walked into the room. "I'm creating a blog," I replied, not taking my eyes off the screen. "I'm going to talk about harassment and consent. I want to help others understand that they're not alone." She smiled, but her eyes were filled with concern. "That's wonderful, dear, but you know there could be consequences, right?" Her response made me hesitate for a second. "Yes, but I can't let fear stop me from acting. If we don't talk about it, nothing will change." My mom nodded and I continued typing. After a few hours, I finished the first post and published it. I asked some friends to review it, and within minutes I was getting messages of support. "This is amazing, Aisha. You need to tell more people," said my friend Lila. "Let's share it on social media." We decided we needed to do something bigger, so we gathered at Lila's house. "If our blog is going to be a success, we need a catchy name," I suggested. "How about Voices That Matter?" proposed my friend Daniel. "It's strong and emphasizes the importance of each of us." We got excited about the idea, and as soon as we decided, we began planning how to promote the blog better. What if we held an event at school? We could invite others to share their stories and maybe even bring in an expert to talk about consent, Lila suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "That would be incredible," I replied, feeling my heart race with excitement. "Let's make it happen." As we discussed, I realized we were coming together in a way we never had before. We were more than just friends. We were a determined group ready to make a difference. "We need to make this happen," I said, looking into each of their eyes. "Together, we're stronger." In the following days, the blog began to gain popularity. The views increased and supportive messages started pouring in. "Aisha, your blog helped me talk about something I never could before," wrote a follower. "Thank you for sharing your story." Each positive comment motivated us even more. One day, while we were at school, our science teacher, Ms. Williams, approached us. "I saw your blog and was very impressed," she said. "If you need a space at school to hold the event, I'm willing to help." With her support, we began planning everything. The anxiety mixed with excitement was palpable. "We need to prepare to make an impactful presentation," Daniel reminded us. "What if we created a video to show during the event?" "Yes, that could help people connect more with what we're trying to say," I agreed, full of energy. This was just the beginning, but I already felt we were making history. The simple act of sharing our experiences could help so many others. And as the day of the event approached, I knew we were ready to raise our voices and ensure they were heard. I was nervous but determined. The day of the event had finally arrived. The school had agreed to let me organize a talk about safety and consent. I knew it was an important step, not just for me, but for all my classmates. As I prepared, I looked in the mirror and took a deep breath. "You can do this, Aisha," I told myself, trying to encourage myself. When I arrived at school, the auditorium was starting to fill up. The murmur of students and parents created an electric atmosphere. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to calm myself, but the nerves were still there. I remembered the support I had received from Marcus and the other parents, and that gave me a bit more courage. "What you're going to say is important," I thought as I looked at the audience settling in. Finally, the event began. I sat at the table with the invited experts. One of them, Dr. Clara, a psychologist who worked with teens, smiled at me as if she could sense my tension. "Remember, Aisha, you're here to make a difference," she said in a gentle voice. That helped me relax a little more. When it was my turn to speak, my heart started racing again. I stood up, and with a slight tremor in my hands, I took the microphone. The audience looked at me expectantly, and I felt that everyone was rooting for me. "Hi, everyone," I began, trying to sound confident. "My name is Aisha, and I'm 14 years old. Today, I want to talk about something that has affected many of us but isn't always discussed. Harassment." I paused for a moment, observing the reactions of those in the audience. I saw some familiar faces, friends and even parents of classmates who cared about their children's safety. Recently, I went through a very difficult experience with the school bus driver. He harassed me, and for a long time, I didn't know how to react, but I realized I wasn't alone. Many other girls have gone through this too. The room fell silent. I continued. I decided I needed to do something, not just for myself, but for all the other kids who might be facing similar situations. And that's why we're here today. We need to talk about consent and safety. We need to protect ourselves and each other. Hearing my words, applause began to echo through the auditorium. I felt a little stronger. Today, we invited experts who will help us better understand these topics. They will give us tools to defend ourselves and also to help one another, I said, gesturing to Dr. Clara and the other guests. When I finished speaking, I felt a wave of relief. The audience applauded, and I could see some people's eyes shining with pride. I didn't expect my story to touch so many people. Dr. Clara stood up and began to speak about the importance of recognizing harassment and how each of us can take action. As the lecture continued, I felt more empowered. With every word, I realized that my voice had power. By the end of the event, when Dr. Clara called me back to the stage to thank me, I couldn't hold back my tears. "Thank you so much, Aisha," she said, looking into my eyes. "You are a true inspiration." The applause echoed once again, and I realized I was starting to make a difference. In that moment, I knew that the fight for safety and respect was not just mine, but belonged to everyone there, united for a greater cause. The atmosphere in the living room was tense, almost palpable. I looked at Marcus's worried face as he organized his notes. We were about to meet with other parents to discuss the safety of our children at school, and I could feel his determination mixed with a hint of anxiety. "I hope they understand the seriousness of what we're facing," he said, running his hand through his hair. "We can't let this happen to anyone else." Later, in the park in front of the school, a group of parents began to gather. The air was chilly, but our indignation warmed our hearts. "Thank you all for being here," I started to say, trying to convey the gravity of the matter. "We know that what happened to our children is not an isolated case. We need to act now." Heads nodded in agreement, and murmurs of support began to echo among us. One mother, Claire, stepped forward. "My son told me that the driver also harassed him. He was so scared that he didn't want to take the bus anymore." The expression on her face was one of pain and anger at the same time. "We can't allow this to continue. Our children need to feel safe." "And it's not just the kids," interjected Sarah, Mia's mother. "We also need to feel safe sending our children to school. We need a safety committee that really works and includes us in the decisions." Her voice was strong, and I admired her for it. The idea was starting to take shape in my mind. "I completely agree," said Marcus, raising his hand. "We need to present a list of demands to the principal. We need a clear plan and a real commitment from the school." The enthusiasm grew among us, and the determination was contagious. "Exactly, Marcus. If the school doesn't listen to us, we will have to fight even harder," stated another father, David, who was clearly affected by the situation. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As we discussed, the idea of creating a school safety committee became a consensus. The group split into small pairs, and each began jotting down their suggestions. "Let's list what we truly want," I suggested, taking notes. "Training for drivers, awareness programs, and a direct communication channel between parents and the administration. And a safe space for the kids to report any incidents without fear of retaliation," added Sarah. "We need to ensure they know their voices are heard." Time passed quickly, and the energy of the meeting was high. With each story, with every idea that emerged, I felt our struggle solidifying. "We need to act fast," Marcus said, his eyes shining. "If we don't do this now, we risk losing momentum." "Absolutely," I agreed. "We should meet again soon, maybe even next week. That way we can present our demands to the principal and demand a formal meeting." When the day came to an end, we parted with the feeling that we had taken an important step. "We can't give up," Marcus said on the way home. "For our children, we have to keep fighting until something changes." I looked at him, admiring his determination. He was right. This was just the beginning, and we were all in this fight together. "I'll help in any way I can," I replied, feeling the flame of hope ignite within me. Our voices need to be heard. That night, I fell asleep with the certainty that we were beginning a change, not just for Aisha, but for all the children who deserve to feel safe and protected. The atmosphere was electrified when I arrived at school for the new protest. The sun was starting to set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the parking lot where parents gathered. holding signs that cried out for change. I couldn't help but feel a mix of nervousness and determination. What we were about to do was much bigger than us, and I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. My dad, Marcus, stood beside me, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you ready, Aisha?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine. "Yes, Dad. I just hope they listen to us this time," I replied, trying to hide the anxiety in my voice. As more parents arrived, I could see the indignation etched on their faces. There was a constant murmur of voices, all sharing stories of children who had gone through similar experiences to mine. I approached a group of mothers, and one of them, the mother of a friend of mine, greeted me. "Aisha, you have to remember that you're not alone. We're all here for you and for our children," she said, holding a sign that read, "Safety for our children." "We're going to make some noise today," I added, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Time passed, and soon the meeting began. The principal, visibly uncomfortable, positioned himself in front of the school, surrounded by parents who crowded in to hear him. He started to speak, his hesitant voice echoing among us. "I understand that many of you are here due to legitimate concerns about school transportation safety. We are taking this very seriously," he said, but his response felt superficial and evasive. "But what are you really going to do about it?" shouted one mother, her voice resonating among the murmurs of the crowd. "Our children are in danger." The principal tried to continue, but the frustration was palpable. Looking around, I saw my dad preparing to speak. He has always been someone who isn't afraid to stand up. He stepped forward, and the crowd quieted, waiting for his words. "My name is Marcus, and I'm Aisha's father," he began, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "My daughter was harassed by a driver who was supposed to take care of her and other kids. And it's not just Aisha, other parents here have similar stories. What else needs to happen for you to take serious action?" The crowd began to murmur in support, and I felt my heart race. True. It was as if my father were channeling all our pain and anguish into his words. He continued, "We need a safety committee that involves parents and students. We need real changes, and we need them now." At that moment, I raised my hand, determined to make my voice heard. "I wrote a letter to the principal, and I would like to read it," I said, my voice trembling slightly. The principal nodded, and silence fell as I grabbed the paper I had prepared. "My name is Aisha, and I am one of the students at this school. I am here to demand that you take concrete actions to ensure the safety of all of us. No one should have to go through what I went through. We can no longer allow this to happen." I began to read, and with each word, I felt the strength of my voice growing. We want a safe and welcoming environment, and that includes the dismissal of people who do not deserve to be near us. The crowd erupted in applause. The principal looked taken aback, but the energy among us was undeniable. I could feel that we were making history right there. At the end of the meeting, the principal committed to hearing our demands and to meeting again with the parents. As the crowd dispersed, I saw my father approach me, his gaze filled with pride. "You were amazing, Aisha. Your voice really matters," he told me, and I smiled, feeling a wave of hope. We were just beginning to fight, and I knew that together we could make a difference. Sitting at the kitchen table, my friends and I were reflecting on the past few weeks. The sun streamed through the window, but the light illuminating that moment was the feeling that we were making a difference. The activism that had started with our small meeting had spread like wildfire. "I think we are finally being heard," I commented, looking at them. "The school promised to train the drivers and implement awareness programs. This is a start." Mia, who was sitting next to me, smiled. "Yes, but we still need to do more. Jonathan is still there. He can't keep driving those kids." Her words echoed in my mind. It was true. Despite all the promises, Jonathan's presence still loomed like a shadow. I couldn't ignore the feeling of anguish it caused me. "Do you think we should do something about it?" I asked hesitantly. I didn't want to seem over the top, but the idea that he could continue to threaten other children was unbearable. "Of course," Leo exclaimed, a determined gleam in his eyes. "We need to make noise. If we don't, nothing will change." He always had that way of looking at things, and I admired his courage. Let's organize a new protest, but this time, let's prepare a list of demands to present to the school. That's right, I agreed, feeling the adrenaline rise. We need a plan. If the school won't act, we will force them to do so. In the following days, we met frequently. We wrote a detailed list of our demands: the dismissal of Jonathan, mandatory safety training for drivers, clear reporting protocols, and psychological support for victims. Each item was discussed, debated, and finally approved by all of us. It was our way of ensuring that Aisha's fight and that of so many other children would not be in vain. Finally, the day of our new protest arrived. A sense of nervousness and excitement hung in the air. As we organized ourselves, I could see the determination on the faces of the parents who joined us. "We're in this together, right?" I asked Marcus, who had become a sort of leader of the movement. He nodded, the serious expression of someone who knows that the fight for justice is never easy. "Absolutely, Aisha. We won't give up until Jonathan is held accountable," he replied, his voice firm. I felt a mix of gratitude and adrenaline. He truly cared. We all did. The crowd gathered in front of the school, and the colorful signs we held reflected our anger and determination. "No more harassment. Our children deserve safety, and justice for Aisha," were some of the messages demanding attention. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, and the collective energy was palpable. When the police arrived, my heart raced. "They're here to monitor," Mia whispered, observing the officers approaching. One of the officers began taking statements. I remembered everything I had been through and how this fight had become part of me. I walked up to him, determined. "Excuse me, sir, but we need to talk. I am Aisha, and I am one of the victims." The officer looked at me seriously. "What would you like to report?" With a steady voice, I began to share my story, each word heavy with the pain I had felt. The school bus driver, Jonathan, harassed several children, including me. It is unacceptable for him to keep driving. We need safety and protection. He listened attentively, and when I finished, he thanked me. "We will document this. Your courage is important to us." I felt a chill in my stomach, but also a warmth in my chest. We were doing this. We were being heard. The protest unfolded, and the pressure on the school mounted. The promise of change was in the air, but I knew we still had a long way to go. As I looked at the faces of my friends and the parents, I realized that we were a force to be reckoned with, and this force was just beginning to manifest. I couldn't sleep that night. Anguish consumed me, yet a growing determination surged within me. Jonathan was still there, as if nothing had happened, and I knew I couldn't allow that to continue. It was then that, at dawn, my father and Marcus decided to take action. He sat down with me at the breakfast table, his expression heavy with seriousness. "Aisha," he began, "I can't stand by while this happens to you and other children. Do you remember what I found out about Jonathan?" "Yes, Dad," I replied, my voice trembling. "You said he had a history. Does that mean he could have done this to other girls too?" "Exactly, and that's why I need to go to the police. We need them to know about this." He took a deep breath as if the words were heavy in his throat. "I will take all the information I gathered. We cannot let this slide." I watched as he picked up the phone and started dialing. "Hi, I would like to speak to the detective handling the case of the school bus driver. My name is Marcus, and I have some information that may be relevant." With each word he spoke, my heart raced. My father was becoming the voice I couldn't be. After a tense conversation, he left the house, determined. I stayed home, anxious, wondering what might happen. Hours later, he returned, his gaze a mix of relief and concern. "Aisha, the police are going to act. They're going to confront Jonathan this afternoon," he said, and I felt a chill in my stomach. "They need your statement." The thought of having to relive everything again left me anxious, but I knew it was necessary. When the time came, we headed to the school, where the police were already waiting for me. The sirens echoed in the distance, and my heart felt like it was about to escape from my chest. "Are you ready?" my dad asked, holding my hand tightly. "I don't know, Dad. What if he recognizes me? What if he tries to intimidate me?" Insecurity washed over me. Don't worry about that. You're stronger than you think, and we're in this together. His voice was firm and calm. As we arrived, I saw a group of police officers gathered, their expressions serious, and soon Jonathan was brought into view. He looked at me, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The hatred and anger I felt toward him surged in my heart. "It's him," I whispered, gripping my dad's hand tightly. The police approached us. "We're here to ensure your safety, Aisha. Can you tell us what happened?" one of the officers asked, his tone gentle. I took a deep breath and recounted everything that had happened, every detail, every word he said. With each sentence, I felt my courage growing inside me, as if I was finally lifting a weight off my shoulders. When I finished, one of the officers turned to Jonathan, who was now surrounded. "You are being detained on charges of harassment. We have several complaints against you." The officer's declaration echoed in my mind, and although fear still lingered, a wave of relief washed over me. Days later, the courtroom was packed. I felt a lump in my throat as I entered. Jonathan was there, and his gaze sent a chill down my spine. But beside me, my dad held my hand. "You're brave, Aisha. Remember that," he murmured. When it was my turn to testify, the judge looked at me with a serious expression. "Aisha, you may share your experience with the court." I tried to keep my voice steady. "He harassed me several times. I didn't feel safe on the bus, and I was afraid to tell. But now I know I'm not alone." Tears began to stream down my face, but I refused to be defeated. In the end, the verdict was read. Jonathan was convicted. The relief I felt was indescribable. I felt my dad hug me tightly, and in that moment I realized our fight had been worth it. I was not just a victim, I was an advocate. The fight against harassment had only just begun, and I was ready to continue.